My name is Diane Calloway, and before I tell you what I did, you should know that I was the kind of woman men underestimate exactly once. Just once. Because the second time, there is no second time. I built a company from a folding table in a one-bedroom apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, with $40 in my checking account and a business plan I typed on a laptop with a cracked screen. By the time I was 42, Callaway and Reed Consulting was pulling in $11 million a year. By 45, we'd crossed 20. I had a corner office on the 15th floor of a building that had my name on the lease, not the door, the lease. And I had a husband named Trevor Reed who convinced me, somewhere between the champagne and the corner office, that love and partnership were the same thing. They are not. I know that now. I learned it the afternoon I turned 50, standing in my kitchen in our $4.2 million home in Dilworth, when Trevor looked at me across the Marble Island, the same island I'd picked out, paid for, and argued with the contractor about for 6 weeks, and said, "Diane, no one wants you anymore." He said it like it was a fact, like he was reading me a weather report. Then he handed me divorce papers he'd had drawn up by some discount attorney in Gastonia and told me he was in love with Kayla Simmons, his 29-year-old assistant, and that he'd already told his mother. His mother, before me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the $300 olive oil across the room, even though God knows I wanted to. I just looked at him, folded those papers in half, set them on the Marble Island, and said, "Okay, Trevor." And he smiled, that slow, satisfied smile men get when they think they've won. Baby, he hadn't even seen the board yet. Here's what Trevor never bothered to learn in 17 years of marriage. The name of the company was Callaway and Reed, but Reed was always silent. Reed was the name I gave him as a wedding gift, a courtesy title, an act of love, something to make him feel like a partner in something I'd already built without him. The actual LLC, the contracts, the intellectual property, the real estate holdings, every vendor agreement, every client retainer, every single asset, all of it was registered under Diane Callaway Holdings, Inc. Trevor's name wasn't on a single binding document, not one. He'd attended enough client dinners to feel like a co-founder. He'd sat in enough board meetings to believe his own mythology. He had a title, Chief Operations Officer, that I gave him like you give a child a plastic steering wheel so they feel like they're driving. He was never driving. I was always driving. But Trevor, God bless him, had spent the last 3 years slowly convincing himself otherwise. And somewhere in that delusion, he decided he didn't need me anymore. He decided Kayla, who called spreadsheets the Excel things, could give him the life I built. So I let him believe it. For 63 days, I let him believe it. Because I needed 63 days. My best friend, Rochelle Dupree, who has known me since we were broke 20-somethings sharing a 2-bedroom off Central Avenue, sat across from me at our usual booth at a restaurant in Noda 3 days after Trevor served me papers, and she looked me dead in the face and said, "What are you planning?" "Nothing," I said. She laughed so hard the table shook. "Diane, you have the same face you had in 2009 when that investor tried to lowball you, and you smiled and said, 'Let me think about it.' What happened with that investor? You walked away and let him watch your company triple in value while he sat on the sideline." Diane? Rochelle, what are you doing? I sipped my water. I'm getting a divorce. What I didn't tell Rochelle, what I didn't tell anyone, was that 2 weeks earlier, I'd already had a quiet conversation with my attorney, Lawrence Beaumont, a man I'd worked with for 6 years, a man who knew every clause in every document Callaway Holdings had ever signed. Lawrence was steady, precise, and brilliant in a way that never needed to announce itself. I told him I wanted everything done cleanly, correctly, and completely before Trevor figured out what he didn't have. Lawrence said, "How long do we have?" I said, 60 days. He said, I'll need 63. I said, then you've got 63. While Trevor was busy planning his new life, moving Kayla into a rental in Plaza Midwood, buying her a Porsche Macan with a joint checking account I'd deliberately left open as a breadcrumb trail, I was busy doing something else entirely. I was restructuring. Callaway Holdings quietly absorbed 3 subsidiary agreements that had previously listed the company's operating address as our marital home. Those got moved to a registered office in Uptown Charlotte. Every deferred compensation package, every retained equity stake, every revenue-sharing agreements with our top 4 clients, all of it legally clarified, updated, and signed before Trevor's attorney had even filed the first motion. The piece Trevor didn't know about, the thing that truly broke him when he found out, was the building. See, Trevor had been telling people for 2 years that we co-owned the Callaway and Reed headquarters on South Tryon Street. He said it at dinner parties. He said it on a podcast interview he did for some local business network. He said it to his golf buddies at the club in Ballantyne like it was his proudest achievement. The building was in my name, had been since 2017. There was a moment back then when Trevor had floated the idea of putting both names on the deed, and I'd said I'd look into it, and then I just hadn't. I'd forgotten to look into it, 3 years in a row. Funny how that works. The divorce finalization date was a Tuesday in March. I remember because it rained that morning, one of those cold Charlotte rains that comes in sideways and makes you feel like the city is in a mood. Trevor showed up with his discount attorney and a list of assets he believed he was entitled to, a list, I was told later, that Kayla had helped him put together over a long weekend. Lawrence arrived with 47 pages of documentation. It took 3 hours. By the time it was done, Trevor Reed walked out of that mediator's office with the joint checking account, which had roughly $34,000 left in it after the Porsche, his personal investment portfolio, and the furniture from his home office. He did not walk out with the company. He did not walk out with the building. He did not walk out with a single client because every client's contract had been quietly renegotiated in the preceding 63 days to reflect Callaway Holdings as the sole party of record. He did not even walk out with his title because I'd already restructured the org chart and the COO position, his position, had been eliminated and replaced with a chief strategy officer role we'd posted on LinkedIn 2 weeks prior. I heard he sat in his car for 40 minutes. I heard Kayla called during that time and he didn't answer. I heard a lot of things. What no one tells you about revenge, real, intelligent, quiet revenge, is that it doesn't feel the way movies say it does. It doesn't feel hot. It doesn't feel explosive. It feels like the moment you put down something incredibly heavy that you've been carrying for so long you forgot it wasn't supposed to be yours to carry. It feels like your shoulders dropping 2 inches. It feels like breathing correctly for the first time in years. I went to dinner that night with Rochelle and 2 other girlfriends, Simone Garrett and Paula Tran, and we sat at a table at a steakhouse on South End and drank a very good Cabernet, and Rochelle made a toast that I will not repeat in polite company, but which was absolutely correct, and I laughed until my eyes watered, and it was the first time I'd laughed like that in probably 4 years. Because here's the other thing they don't tell you. When a marriage goes bad, it goes bad slowly, like a slow leak in a tire. You don't notice one day to the next, but you're always running slightly low, always just a little bit flat. You compensate, you adjust your driving, you tell yourself it's fine, you stop noticing what full feels like. That dinner, I felt full. 6 months later, Trevor Reed sued me. His new attorney, an actual real one this time, out of a firm in Uptown, argued that he had an implied partnership interest in Callaway Holdings based on his years of contribution and his title of COO. They came in loud and aggressive and filed a 12-page complaint that used the phrase unjust enrichment 4 times. Lawrence read it, looked up at me over his reading glasses, and said, "This is a creativity exercise, not a legal document." We filed our response in 11 days. The case was dismissed in 5 months. Trevor's legal fees were, I'm told, somewhere north of $80,000. Kayla left him 8 weeks after the dismissal. I don't know the details. I didn't ask. I want to be honest with you about something, because this story deserves honesty. There were nights, especially in that first month, especially at 2 a.m. in that big house that was suddenly too quiet, where I didn't feel powerful or sharp or strategic. There were nights I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and thought about 17 years, about the person I thought I was building something with, about all the small moments I had mistaken for love that were maybe just convenience and comfort and habit, wearing love's clothing. There were nights I grieved Trevor, not the man he turned out to be, the man I thought he was, the man I needed him to be to justify 17 years. That grief was real, and it was ugly, and it had nothing to do with revenge or strategy or the 47 pages of documentation. It was just loss, the plain old-fashioned kind, and I sat with it in the dark and I let it be what it was. Rochelle checked on me. Simone brought food. My daughter, Maya, who was 23 and finishing her MBA at Duke, called me every other night for 3 months and pretended she just wanted to chat, but always managed to make me laugh before she hung up. I was not alone. I want you to know I was not alone. Lawrence Beaumont asked me to dinner for the first time on a Thursday in September, 11 months after the divorce was finalized. He was careful about it. He'd waited, deliberately, almost a full year. He asked in a way that made absolutely clear that no was a complete and respected answer, that he valued our professional relationship above everything, and that if I said no, we would simply continue as we were and never speak of it again. I said yes. We went to a place in South Park, small and Italian and lit like a secret. We talked for 4 hours. We closed the restaurant down, and the waiter had to come ask us twice if we wanted anything else before Lawrence finally laughed and said he supposed we should let the man go home. I don't know how to explain Lawrence, except to say that he's the first person I've been with in my adult life who has never once made me feel like I needed to make myself smaller. He doesn't need to be the smartest person in the room. He doesn't need to win. He doesn't need me to perform uncertainty so he can perform confidence. He sees me, the whole thing, the ambition and the grief and the stubbornness and the 2 a.m. dark nights and the 47 pages. He sees all of it, and he doesn't flinch and he doesn't try to manage it. We got married on a Saturday in June in Asheville, in the mountains, with Rochelle as my maid of honor and Maya crying before the ceremony even started. It was small and real, and exactly what I wanted. At the reception, Rochelle gave a toast, and somewhere in the middle of it, she said, "Diane has always known exactly what she's worth. She just spent a few years letting someone else do the math. She doesn't do that anymore." Everyone laughed. I didn't laugh. I just looked at Lawrence across the table, and he raised his glass, just slightly, like punctuation, and I understood everything inside that tiny gesture. Callaway Holdings is now a $34 million company. We expanded into Atlanta and Nashville last year. We are opening a DC office in the fall. My name is on the building, the actual deed, not just the door. Trevor Reed is consulting on a freelance basis for a mid-sized logistics company in Concord. He has a LinkedIn profile that still lists Callaway and Reed under his experience. His title there reads co-founder. I've thought about flagging it. I haven't. Let him have the title. I have everything else. My name is Diane Callaway Beaumont, and I need you to understand something before you go. When Trevor stood in my kitchen and told me no one wanted me, he believed it. He fully, completely believed it. And for exactly 4 seconds, I counted because I remember everything, I felt it. That cold, shrinking, horrible feeling of believing someone when they tell you who you are. 4 seconds. Then it passed, and I thought, he has no idea what he just handed me. Because here's what Trevor never understood about women like me. We don't fall apart when you tell us we're nothing. We get organized. We get quiet. We get to work. And then one day, while you're busy explaining to people why the company you claim to build no longer exists for you, while you're in a parking deck not answering the phone, while you're watching everything you said was yours turn out to be only ever mine, you'll understand. No one wants you. Those were the wrong words to say to the woman who owned everything.